Yo, what's up, everyone out there in internet land? Thank you for joining me for another YouTube video discussion. And today I want to talk about something that's sort of been floating around in my mind for the past couple of days and get your thoughts on it. Because maybe there's something that I'm not thinking of that you can add to the discussion about what we want to see from Metroid Prime 4. Now, here are four things because it's the fourth Metroid Prime, technically the fifth, depending upon if you. I mean, Federation Force is technically a Prime game, so it's technically the fifth, but you get what I'm saying. Numerically, it's four. So here are four things that I want to see from Metroid Prime 4. But before I get into that, I think it would be interesting if it does come out in 2024, just because of the whole thing that I just did with 4. Like, maybe they could have it to where it's like on the 20th of a day. So, like, for an example, 12/20/2024, to where it's like, so they've already missed their window of opportunity for February and for April. But who knows? It could still happen. But with that being said, if it doesn't come out in 2024, then I'm pretty much going to be convinced, which I pretty much already am about 90% there, convinced that it's not going to be a this generation game, which is fine if it's not. But that's a whole other discussion. Let's go ahead and get into four things that I think, if it does come out this year, and it is a Switch game, that Metroid Prime 4 needs to be a successful game. Now, let's go ahead and just say right off the bat that I think the game's going to be successful anyways. Because of the fact is that it's Metroid, and it's a highly anticipated game. But considering the fact they haven't really been talking as much about it, I wouldn't be surprised if it's one of those kind of games that just sort of slips through or becomes a big, like, kind of like what they did with the Wii U, where they held on to the Mario game for it, knowing good and darn well that they could have released it on the Wii U, but they decided to hold off on it until the Switch to have a big first-party title. I wouldn't be surprised if they do that with Prime. But supposing that it does come out on the Switch, right? I think one of the biggest things that it needs is just metal on metal grinding. Basically, get this thing down to the metal to look as good and run as smoothly as it can. Because I think that if the game looks better than what Metroid Prime Remastered did, then I think it's just going to impress the heck out of people. They're going to want to buy it. And it's going to be the last, like, this is what the Switch was capable of, but none of you really wanted to take the time to do it kind of thing that Nintendo is best known for doing with their consoles. And just sort of show people, it's like, hey, the Switch is a very capable console. And with that in mind, here's the Switch 2. Like, but I think that it really does need to look very impressive. I think it needs to run as smooth as possible also. So, where's the balance of that? Probably somewhere in the middle. Now, if they can get it to be 1080p, 60 frames per second all the time, that's cool. But I do think that it would be better if it just ran better than looking better. I think it looking good would be something that is great to do, and it's very much possible, since it is going to be a first-person game, that it doesn't have to have nearly as much demand, because it's not like you have character animations going on the screen. At least not for this part. That's sort of a hint for later. But while it is in first person and while it is running, I think that you just have to focus more on the environment, so I think it will be easier for it to look better. But if you had to make a sacrifice, I'd rather it run better, because I think it just being an impressive feat of technology is just going to be the thing that's going to help sell it the most. And with that being said, the next thing that it needs is a very intriguing story. And I don't know how they're going to do it, especially if they want to continue to do the isolation thing, right? Because, okay, Samus gets a distress signal and goes somewhere, and that's the tutorial area, kind of like what you got with Metroid Prime. But then after that, it's just like, where do you go next? What do you do next? And I'm not saying that the game has to be linear, but I'm saying that there are ways that maybe you can have the story advance by having sort of like an Otacon character, right? That talks into her ear and just says, hey, I'm picking up a distress signal from this area. And I'm also picking up something from over here. You can choose which one you want to go to, kind of thing. To sort of guide the player to where the next objective is, but without doing very much hand-holding. But I do think that unlike the past Prime games, they need to have better guidance rather than you just walk around until randomly something comes up with a question mark. It's cool that they did that. It's cool they did that because the games have always focused more on being about exploring, more so than it's been about storytelling. But I do think that they need to have an element of storytelling, like what they had with Metroid Other M, and with other Metroid games in the past, but they need to bring it up a level to where this actual character's talking. Now, whether these are Chozo-like alien creatures that speak in their tongue like they did with Metroid Dread, right, that speak in their tongue and it's translated down at the bottom, or you hear it translated because Samus would have that kind of technology to have a translator, or whatever you want to do, that's fine. And of course, chronologically speaking, Prime does take place between Metroid 1 and Metroid 2, so it's okay to still have Metroids in there and all kinds of stuff. You don't have to worry about continuing it from Dread because that's sort of the end of the timeline kind of thing. But I do think it would be good to have a story in there and characters that you can interact with. You don't necessarily have to have a choice bar where it's like you choose the dialogue that you have to say. But it would just be nice to have something, even if it's just cutscenes of maybe, you scan something and it shows a scene from the past, kind of like what we got with like Breath of the Wild and stuff, where we can get some sort of interaction and understanding of the story and the events that happened without having to read paragraphs and paragraphs of lore. There's absolutely nothing wrong with having that in the game. But I'm just saying that we have come further along than what we have from like the Wii and the GameCube days. So maybe necessarily people might not want to read a lot. And so you can maybe have that in there for some context of like after that scene that they saw, they read something that's like an update to experiment 99967 or something, whatever. And you get some more context about what's happened, but it's not really relevant. Or maybe you get some biology lore about the creatures that you scan or something. The next thing, number 3, seems like it is a given. Like, this is going to happen no matter what. But just in case it's not, I want to just preface this that I really would love to see new and interesting mechanics. I mean, of course, you gotta have the same stuff in there. Like, the screw attack would be awesome. Having the morph ball is probably going to be a given, like 100%, because that's just in every game. But what I mean by it is like how when you got, I believe it was on Metroid Prime 3 for the Wii, you could do something with, like, the grapple beam and grab stuff and then pull, like, shields off enemies or pull stuff off doors. Something like that, to if you decide to use the Joy-Cons and you use it for movement, that you're able to do something interesting. Even if it's just like grab an enemy and then punch them. Just to make it to where it's something new than just the same old hold a gun and shoot. Again, nothing wrong with that gameplay. It's tried and it's true. It's Metroid Prime Classic. Right? But we do need to have games evolve. And as great as it would be to just go back and play a traditional Metroid Prime like game, like 1, we don't need it to be so difficult like 2, but we don't need to have it be super linear either. And I just think that having new and interesting mechanics that encourage exploration, but also have some interesting new stuff for combat, right? Like, I believe it was Metroid Prime 2 had literally just like the light beam and the dark beam and then the Annihilator that was both. Not very interesting guns. But Metroid Prime 1 had better stuff because there was a freeze one, there was a fire one, there was stuff for everything. So if you had something like that to where, and these could easily be items also. They don't have to necessarily be like a super bomb, but they could be something towards like it's a boomerang that you throw and that's like a wind thing and it causes stuff to move around. You could almost make it Zelda-like in that way, to where you have these interesting puzzles that you solve with these unique items, but they can also be used in combat in other ways like that. I just think there'd just be really great use of the technology that we have with the Joy-Cons, and you can also figure out a way to make it work with the Pro Controllers also for those that don't want to use it. And yeah, just very unique puzzles and combat scenarios and very interesting and new ways to play the game mechanically. Because, again, having a traditional Metroid Prime game is going to be great. But otherwise, it's just going to feel like we're treading on the same territory. And you got to have something new in there. You got to have something new to be like, oh, that's an interesting twist. Because just like how Super Metroid was basically just a bigger version of the original Metroid, they did add in new stuff. They added in new weapons and like the jumping ability to go between the walls. They added in new stuff to make it more interesting than what the first two did. So yeah. And just as a side note, I'm going to go ahead and make this one super short since I went longer in the last point. But the fourth and final point is it just needs to be not open world. When I say open world, I don't mean open world like the Zeldas have been, and you just go wherever you want, whenever you want to do it. But maybe open zone, if that makes any sense. Like when you walk into an area, you can get to anywhere as long as you have the ability. And that's where I think that it's going to probably shine the most, is when you're able to look up and you can see, or even if you get up to a top part, you're able to see the whole world that you're going to explore before you, but you can't get this stuff just yet, because maybe you need the morph ball to get here. You know? I know that that's stuff that's been in the past before for other Metroids, but a lot of times they are locked into corridors or rooms. But I'm talking about a more open planet. Like if I was to walk outside these doors right now, I can see everything. You know, I can look down a hill and see the whole neighborhood. I can look up a hill and see additional house. But I can't get there unless I walk or I drive, right? So obviously I need a tool. It's not just going to be a corridor. So because of that, I think that it would just be an interesting thing for you to basically do like what a lot of Metroids have been doing before. Where as you're walking along, you see a red door and you're like, oh, let's scan that. I need the plasma gun, as an example, to get there. I don't have that yet, but I'm going to make a note of it. And then you should be able to then ping it, put a little mark on the map or whatever to say I need to come back here later. And then just continue to explore. But you can see everything, so you kind of get an idea of just how vast this world is and just how many items you're going to need. But I think that goes along initially with the gameplay that I talked about, and the other points that I've made before about just bringing in something new to the series. So those are my 4 points. But I think that something that would be also interesting to throw in there is just sort of a side asterisk thing, is even if they want to remove one of these and maybe say, okay, we don't want to have a big, open, vast world because just technology, from a technological standpoint, it can't be done on the Switch. Throw in multiplayer. You know, something that I really liked about Metroid Prime Hunters, which technically makes it the 6th game, but whatever. Something that was interesting about Metroid Prime Hunters was the fact that it had online multiplayer, right? And even Metroid Prime Federation Force was interesting in the fact that it had online cooperative. So you could easily bring these things together and have an online mode where you can do versus, and maybe it's aliens versus Federation people. Maybe you play a bunch of Samus-like clones and you take on Dark Samus-like clones. I don't know how you want to do it. I'm just saying you can easily make it like Hunters, right? Because if we're going to have characters, which I want us to interact with characters, I would love to be able to interact again with Trace and Psylocke and a lot of the characters that we've gotten before in the past. And maybe because you have interacted with them, maybe you've done some kind of a side quest to get them on your side, you can then play with them online and do different abilities. Or maybe you can do some kind of a deathmatch thing now, almost like an Overwatch, where it's like now you team up in a squad of these people that have unique abilities, or it can easily just be just team deathmatch, and it's free for all between you and 3 other players, and it's depends on who you've unlocked. But also, I think it would be cool to do cooperative stuff also, just like you can with other games. Like I talked about before with how it can almost be like an Overwatch kind of game. Maybe you can team up with 3 other people to have a 4-player cooperative, not like dungeon, but like objectives where you have to defeat something within a certain amount of time or defeat a boss or whatever. But those are just some ideas to throw out there real quick. I don't want to make this video too long, and I feel like I've made it 5 minutes longer than what I meant to. So I appreciate you guys watching all the way to the end if you did stick around. I really do appreciate that. Feel free to give me a like and a thumbs up if you want. You don't have to. I'm just not that kind of channel. I don't really care that much because I just appreciate you watching. But if you do have any thoughts about anything that maybe I've missed or just anything that I've talked about here, feel free to leave a comment on it. I'd love to hear what you have to say. Otherwise, guys, I hope that you have yourself a good one, and I'll see you in the next video.